I got to make sure that I don't get interrupted here. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the golf course Complete Streets Study meeting. I'm Counselor Borrego, and I just want to, I'm on here for a minute. As you can see, I'm sitting in my car right now. I'm out and it's that season. So I do what I do where I have to do it from. I just want to welcome everyone and thank you for participating in this study. It's a really, really important study. And as I'm out in the community, I'm hearing more and more comments. And then I just kind of challenge people to get on, to come on to our meeting. Tonight, Lee Engineering is going to be presenting some of their findings for the last few meetings that they've had with the community. And I'm just going to say all options are going to be on the table. So this is really going to be an important time. We're going to have a longer than normal comment period, probably about 60 days or so to the new year, to give people ample time to, if they haven't learned about the project, to learn about it, to, really digest the recommendations that are going to be on tonight, presented to you tonight, and to comment if you have, because sometimes it takes time to absorb everything. It's a really long stretch of road. It's everything from Rio Rancho to Montano. And, each of those areas, those segments are different, and they perform differently. So it's important that we look at the entire length. This is a $118,000 project. And then we will be looking at design considerations once the study is done, and looking for funding to implement some of the design considerations that are going to be presented. So if you look at the study after tonight, and you think of priorities and think of short-term priorities and long-term priorities. What could we fund immediately, and what could we fund in the longer term? So that's kind of the information that I would like to leave you with. I'm not going to stay on the meeting very long, and I'm going to leave it in the hands of Aaron Sussman and Jonathan Cruz and Susan V. Hill, and Kendra, I think, is on there also from MergeCog, Mr. Cog, and then Tom Minicucci. And also with you is our traffic engineer, Melissa, or transportation engineer, I'm sorry, Melissa Lazoya, and she's one of our chief engineers. So you're in really good hands tonight. And if you have questions or comments, please feel free to call me or Susan, and we will try to answer your questions. With that, I'm going to leave you. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a successful meeting tonight. Thank you all.
Thank you. I believe what she said, I know she broke up for me on the comment period, was through the end of December. So that's what we've discussed. If anyone else had missed that information. Nice to see you all. Actually, I'd like to ask that you put your names in the chat so we can kind of have a attendance, basically, of the meeting. And I'll just write that all down. If you want to add your name to the chat and your email. If you don't worry about it, but it's helpful.
All right, Susan, should I jump in? Should we get started?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, Susan. Thanks to the counselor. Thanks everyone for joining us this evening. So my name is Aaron Sussman. I'm a planner with Bohannon Houston. We are leading this study along with Lee Engineering. It's a project for obviously Council Borrego and City Council Services and the Mid-Region Council of Governments. So again, wanted to thank everybody for coming tonight, and we have a lot of ground to cover. This is the last scheduled meeting for the study this year. So what we'd like to do is spend a little time reviewing our work to date. This is sort of the second phase of the project that we're entering, where we're moving from existing conditions into a draft set of recommendations. So we're excited to share all of that with you this evening. So a couple bits of housekeeping before we get into that. Please, as Susan mentioned, please enter your name and your email into the chat box. This sort of is our means of tracking attendance and registration for the evening, and just sort of we know how many folks have been participating, and then there's an opportunity for us to follow up with you if you're interested. We are also recording the meeting, so if you are interested in checking into the website in a couple of weeks, we'll have the video of this meeting up there as well. And if other folks that you know may be interested, this is not the only chance to learn about the project. So we'll share a link of the project for the project website at the end of the presentation. It's also posted at the top of the chat box. So if you scroll up to the very top of the chat, you'll be able to see the project website and click to that link. So as I mentioned, our sort of scope for tonight, we've got a good amount of ground to cover. I'll try and cover it quickly so that we've got time for discussion. As I mentioned, we have gone through a pretty extensive existing conditions analyses, and then we're now looking at sets of potential alternatives and recommendations. And we're kind of simplifying this corridor in some respects. It's a long corridor, as the councilor mentioned. There's a lot of variations and permutations along the corridor, but there's sort of two general segments that have emerged, and different sets of priorities for those segments. So we'll talk about the segment from Montano Road to Paradise Boulevard, and then from Paradise Boulevard north to West Side at the boundary with Rio Rancho. So just to give everybody a quick recap and make sure we're all sort of at the same starting point when we get into our set of recommendations and discussion later in the meeting this evening. The study area for this project is a 5-mile corridor from Montano Road north to West Side Boulevard. There are several major intersections, as you know, Paseo del Norte, Paradise, Irving, McMahon, Montano at the southern end. It's a corridor that's really just got some distinct pieces to it. So there's a lot of residential development and subdivisions along the corridor, but it's also sort of punctuated by these commercial nodes around the major intersections. And so those are shown in orange in the map on the right. Our particular study is it's a complete streets study, and what we're ultimately looking at is how can we connect these residential, commercial, and public land uses, recreational opportunities, schools together, and to complete the set of bicycle and pedestrian facilities along the corridor. So currently there are sidewalks and bike lanes and pieces of the corridor, but they're not complete. There are gaps. It's a corridor with relatively high travel speeds, and there's not a lot of opportunities to cross the street. So if we want to create a roadway that meets a larger set of user needs, we need to rethink sort of how everything is configured a little bit. So our objectives are to think about how we can balance these sets of needs, essentially, traffic operations and moving cars relatively smoothly along the corridor, while creating something of more of a Main Street type character along Golf Course Road, and allowing for more of a community kind of oriented corridor to emerge. And so in order to do that, we want to do things like apply complete streets principles, or Vision Zero, which is about reducing traffic fatalities, addressing safety concerns, and then, as the councilor mentioned, ultimately identifying recommendations that we can design and implement over time, and make this more of a complete corridor that works for bicyclists, pedestrians, transit users, and motorists. So not that everybody here needs a sort of regional lesson, but just so that, again, we're sort of thinking about things in the same terms. I want to talk about the context for a moment. So Golf Course Road's highlighted here in yellow. It's obviously a north-south corridor, of which there are not many in Northwest Albuquerque, but it's a different kind of corridor than Unser and Coors, which are major north-south principal arterials that carry much more regional traffic, higher speed traffic, longer distances. Golf Course Road is kind of a secondary route. It connects to these east-west arterials, and what that means is there's some opportunities to do things a little bit differently, and for Golf Course Road to serve different sets of users and different types of trips, in particular local trips to those commercial nodes, to recreational sites along the corridor. At the same time, though, there is the reality that this is still a pretty auto-oriented corridor, and there is a lot of traffic along the roadway. So I'm not sure how well everybody can read the numbers on the map, but those show traffic volumes ranging from 18,000 to 34,000 vehicles per day. The highest traffic is just to the south of McMahon or Ellison Drive. The posted speeds are generally 35 to 40 miles an hour. Throughout the corridor, there's 2 lanes in each direction. There's wide medians in the southern portion of the corridor between Montano and Paradise, and then center turn lanes and narrower medians the farther north we go. There's not a lot of direct access along the corridor, so generally there's long distances between traffic signals, not a lot of turns that are allowed along long stretches of the corridor. But there is that kind of interesting stretch too to the north of Paradise Boulevard in the Bernalillo County portion of the corridor between Paradise and Irving, where we do have residential homes that open up onto Golf Course Road. So as I mentioned, pretty high traffic volumes, 20,000 to 30,000 vehicles per day. These maps show congested conditions along the corridor. And basically the message here is the darker the colors, the higher the levels of congestion, either in the morning or the PM peak periods. So in the morning, we see a couple of segments with some of those darker colors where we have more congested conditions. And then in the PM peak period map on the right, we have a number of segments where we're approaching congested conditions, or even segments where the road is at or above capacity. So basically, there's times of the day when Golf Course Road has more vehicles on it than it was intended when it was built. And so part of what that causes is some congestion, especially approaching these major intersections and these east-west corridors. And in particular, again, that Irving to McMahon Ellison section is where we see some particularly significant congested conditions in both periods, the morning and the evening. When we project conditions into the future too, which is important to understand how are conditions changing, are traffic volumes likely to increase or decrease, we project some modest increases over the next 20 years based on the most recent Metropolitan Transportation Plan approved last spring by the Mid-Region Council of Governments, about 5 to 10% growth in traffic volume. So what this tells us is that, unlike some corridors in other parts of the city where traffic volumes are not going up that much, there's not that much congestion, and those are opportunities to maybe take existing travel lanes and reallocate them for bike lanes and buffers and things like that. That doesn't really seem to be an option here. We've got congested conditions currently, and it's not projected to get better. So at the same time that we've got these congested conditions and we've got a lot of vehicle traffic taking place along the corridor, we have this real need to better improve conditions for pedestrians and bicyclists. So the map on the left shows locations where we have existing sidewalks or gaps in the sidewalk network in red, and then where we have yellow and orange colors are locations where the sidewalks are narrower than we might like. So we can see there are some gaps in the system, and there are also some locations where we would like for there to be wider sidewalks than we have available. The map on the right shows existing and proposed bicycle facilities. Proposed facilities are in dashed colors and existing are solid. So the big thing that you'll notice on the map on the right is this gap between Paseo del Norte and La Orillo Road, where there aren't any on-street bike lanes at all. There is a multi-use trail at sidewalk level between Paseo and Paradise and southern portions of the corridor as well. I'm gonna ask if you don't mind for everybody to mute their microphones just so that we don't have any feedback while we're presenting. And if you have a question, I think the easiest thing to do is to type that into the chat or to raise your hand, and then we'll stop for questions at various points during the presentation today. And I will ask city staff and Claire, my coworker at BHI, to chime in and interrupt me if we've got a pertinent question that we're skipping over.
Erin, I just wanted to say that this connection seems to be skipping out on just every once in a while for you, and it hasn't been a problem so far, but if it does, I'll stop you and ask you to repeat whatever sentence we lost.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Let me do one thing really quick that might improve that. Okay. So going back to the question of pedestrian and bicycle facilities, just to recap things a little bit. again, from a sidewalk pedestrian standpoint, we have gaps along portions of the corridor. One of the other dynamics is that we've got long stretches where the sidewalks are right up against subdivision walls. And what that does is it kind of reduces the functional width of the sidewalk because it pushes people out into the roadway. And then if you don't have much of a buffer or barrier between the sidewalk and the travel lanes, you feel pretty pinched in. So the conditions in some places are not particularly comfortable. Where we do have bike buffers, or we do have landscape buffers or buffers on the edges of the roads, they're generally pretty narrow, and then the stretches where we don't have any sort of buffers at all, like you can see in this image on the far right. So there's not much to separate motorists from bicyclists and pedestrians along the corridor. Similarly, again, there's gaps in on-street bike lanes, but we do have multi-use trails along portions of the corridor. So one of our real objectives is how do we stitch those networks together and make sure we've got complete sets of bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So I wanted to just recap for a moment the comments that we've received before we get into some of our alternatives and preliminary ideas and recommendations for the corridor. So one of the first things that we heard again and again is that bicyclists and pedestrians really just do not feel safe walking or traveling along the corridor. And that makes it difficult to access these east-west trails that go through the study area or to access the commercial nodes along Golf Course Road. Generally, we heard support for managing or somewhat reducing vehicle speeds and improving conditions for non-auto users. At the same time, we heard that there's some real concerns about speeding, racing, that it's difficult for users to cross Golf Course Road. And we also heard some very specific locations that where safeties were cited. So I wanted to highlight those here: Marnolin Road, Samara Road, and Calle Norteña. So just some general observations and takeaways. Again, we have there's sort of this tension there.
That was a long gap. Maybe it'd be better if you just take your video off. Hi, everyone.
I apologize. Can you hear me?
We can. Yeah, that was a long gap. So I thought maybe if you just take your
What was
video
the last
off.
thing that you heard? My apologies.
You were talking about gaps in the pedestrian pathways, I believe.
Okay.
Top of that
My apologies. I'm not quite sure what happened, but I feel like I've got a stable connection at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So let's try this again. All right. Can everybody see the screen?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for your patience and my apologies there. So hopefully I'll not cover the same ground too much twice or fill in what you all missed. But just to recap, we do have some pretty significant gaps in both the sidewalk networks and in the bikeway networks along the corridor. One of the other components and challenges along the corridor is that it's built out in a lot of places. So we have subdivision walls on both sides of the corridor that can really reduce the effective width of the roadway and effective width of the sidewalk. So it feels like you're sort of pushed out from the subdivision walls. Where we do have sidewalks or buffers, they're pretty narrow. And similarly, where we have bike lanes along the corridor, they're pretty narrow as well. So our real objective here is how do we kind of expand on these networks and stitch them together and make sure we've got complete opportunities for people to access their destinations. I wanted to recap some of the comments that we've heard and concerns that we have received as well about just conditions along the corridor, and make sure that those are sort of understood and shared here. So in particular, what we heard again and again is that pedestrians and bicyclists just do not feel particularly safe walking or traveling along the Golf Course Road. And so that means it feels uncomfortable to access the trails that run east-west through the study area or to access the commercial nodes along Golf Course Road. At the same time, we heard generally support for managing, reducing vehicle speeds, improving conditions for non-auto users. And then again, there's concerns about speeding and racing, and these vehicle conditions making it difficult for motorists and pedestrians to cross Golf Course Road. A few locations where we heard some frequently cited safety concerns include Marna Lynn Road, Samara Road, and Coyote Nortenia. So to summarize a few kind of takeaways and observations, we really feel that there's this clear tension along the corridor between traffic flow and safety for other modes. That's made worse by the gaps in the network. So it's high speeds and feels uncomfortable for users. And then in some places we don't have bike lanes or sidewalks at all. Similarly, there's not a lot of opportunities to cross Golf Course Road. So if you're trying to get from a residential area to one of these commercial areas or a recreational site, if you want to use a formal crossing location, sometimes you have to go quite a bit out of your direction to do that. There are some great east-west multi-use trails that go through the study area, but they're not always super well connected to other bikeways. So again, that creates some barriers. But at the same time, again, we do have some real things to build on. We've got a variety of retail and service options along the corridor. There's these kind of community focal points. So if we can bring more people to those places, that would be obviously a desirable outcome. So before we get into the more specific recommendations, some general recommendations for the corridor is that the 2 general purpose lanes that we have in each direction, that we should retain those. But the opportunity lies in these wide medians along portions of the corridor, which we're going to propose that they could be repurposed for other uses and users, in particular on-street bike lanes or potentially improvements to pedestrian facilities and trails. At the same time, there's some opportunities to make the travel lanes a little bit narrower that can reduce speeds, and it gives us a little bit more space that we could reallocate for bike lanes. But making the travel lanes a little bit narrower doesn't mean we're going to take away travel lanes. It just means we'll make them a little bit narrower, and that tends to have a little bit of a speed reduction impact. We also have identified some additional pedestrian crossing locations. Those both are important in terms of improving access to commercial areas, but also means of traffic calming. So important consideration that we'll come back to a little bit later in the presentation. So a couple of points that I wanted to speak to that inform our thinking about the types of improvements along the corridor are the sort of notion of user comfort level. And so I want to share these 2 slides, and then I want to open it up for a discussion for a couple of moments. So these images show different types of sidewalk facilities or shared use path on the far right. And these can be options along Golf Course Road. And so part of the question is, what is most desirable and where would people feel most comfortable? We also are looking, we're also looking at this from a bicyclist standpoint. So I'll come back to that in a second, but I want to open it up for a moment. And if anybody has any questions or comments about, walking along this corridor now and what it might take for you to feel comfortable walking along Golf Course Road. So if anybody has thoughts, want to enter in the chat or to raise their hand, that would be great. So while you're thinking about it, let me describe what you're looking at a little bit. So the image on the left shows a section of Golf Course Road currently. The image in the middle shows a portion of Central Avenue, which features wide sidewalks and street trees separating pedestrians from motor vehicle traffic. And then the image on the right is from out of state, but shows a wide path along the side of the roadway with something of a landscape buffer area to push vehicles sort of farther away, create a little bit of a space between pedestrians and motorists.
I
don't know. My raise your hand button is hiding somewhere.
Go ahead, whoever is. Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Okay. I like the idea of the trees because they provide shade for walkers, but they also can impair automobiles' vision. And like if they're making right-hand turns, they may not see pedestrians. I do like the separation from the street, though, for walkers and even as a shared trail.
Yeah, thank you. And just as a note, while street trees can be an impediment to vision, we when these get placed, things like sight lines and sight distance come into play to make sure that there would not be located in a place that would impact the vision of motorists or people turning in and out of a driveway or a side street. A couple of comments in the chat. Either of the two options would be better than the current state. And then a comment from Roger Martinez, the large sidewalks on the photo on the right and the separation of the middle photo. Okay, so kind of combining the best of those two. Other thoughts or comments? This is great. We're just sort of generally looking for this kind of feedback. All right, if you have other thoughts, please feel free to throw them in the chat box. We're gonna ask the same question from a bicyclist standpoint. And so again, the image on the far left is our set of existing conditions along a portion of Golf Course Road. The image in the middle shows a buffered bike lane where we've got a little bit more separation for bicyclists from motor vehicle traffic. And then the image on the right, sort of similar to the path in the previous photo, but a trail at sidewalk level that's separated and really meant to be used for bicyclists. Kathy Adams makes an important point that if trees are not maintained, then they can become a visual barrier for cars. And that is an important consideration, the sort of general maintenance question. So let me speak to, all right. Laura says, currently I feel nowhere is safe for walking except La Orilla north to Butterfield, but only on the east side. I guess a follow-up question for Laura, would you be inclined to walk along Golf Course Road if there were improved opportunities to do so? And the answer to that is maybe. And I think we hear that. That's a fairly common answer, I think. And I see a few people nodding in agreement that it might take some doing to make this feel really comfortable for non-motorists. So sort of in that vein, let me jump to this next slide. One of the real kind of points of consideration that we've had as part of the study is which types of users are we trying to attract? So there's a kind of common tool or way of thinking about bicycle planning in which we can think of the 4 different types of bicyclists. And I think Golf Course Road's a really good example of this. So the idea is that if you take the whole population of US residents, there's about 60%, or let me start, I guess, with the people who say they will absolutely not get on a bike. So there's about 1/3 of the population that says, no matter what the conditions are like, I'm not going to get on a bicycle. On the other end of the spectrum, there's like 1% of the population that says, I will get on a bicycle and I will ride no matter what the conditions. So, this image on the left, no problem, I'm on it, I'll do it. There's another group that we refer to as enthused and confident, which will ride if there are quality infrastructure options. And then there's a pretty significant portion of the population that falls into this category called interested but concerned, where they might be willing to ride more, but they really, really want to see improvements in bicycle facilities in order to make that happen. And so who are we trying to plan for Golf Course Road is the really big question. And I think right now, it's probably fair to say that Golf Course Road is really only a place where the strong and fearless, or maybe the enthused and confident bicyclists are going to ride. So pretty small percentage of the population is going to feel comfortable doing that. So the question is, can we provide infrastructure types, facility types that maybe appeal to a broader range of users? So I see one message in the chat. Roger says, if there are on-street bike lanes, the middle photo would be the choice. More signage. Do not like the photo on the right. It creates conflicts for all users. Interesting, important point. All right, so I want to kind of keep this perspective in mind as we go through these alternatives. So again, back to sort of the general opportunities that we see along the corridor. So again, I mentioned earlier, we can kind of divide the corridor into 2 components. There's Montano Road to Paradise Boulevard, and then Paradise Boulevard to West Side Boulevard. In general, there's a lot more flexibility and there are more options for the southern portion of the corridor because we have these wide medians that create the possibility of reallocating roadway space and providing either on-street bike lanes, buffers, or wider sidewalks and things like that. We do have some existing trails at curb level, and those could be expanded upon. Those could also be utilized in place of sidewalks. To the boulevard, this corridor is much more constrained. It's generally built out on both sides. There's a lot of subdivisions on either side with retaining walls or sound walls. The medians are much narrower. In other places, there's just a two-way left turn lane. So we can reallocate small amount of space to provide wider bike lanes, but not a ton. There are some gaps in the sidewalks along this stretch of the corridor as well. And then there's not much
Aaron, you're on mute, but the last thing you said was,
My
can
apologies.
allocate-
Are we losing internet connection again?
yeah, the last thing you
Okay,
said was.
I'm really sorry. What was the last thing everybody heard this evening?
You said there is some space we can allocate, but not a lot in that Paradise Boulevard section. Right?
Okay.
Okay. No, it was.
So, all right, the only way for me to get back is I'm gonna need to change to a different portion of my house, and I'm gonna lose internet for just a moment. So can everybody bear with me for like 90 seconds? And again, my apologies here.
Like a Halloween picture of him. So frozen.
Okay, my apologies, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm terribly sorry. In like 2 years of working remotely, this is the worst worst set of connections I've had.
Looks like he froze a little again. He knows though, he's gonna start up. Sometimes it helps to turn off your video, I've noticed. See, maybe he wants to try that.
The joys of virtual meetings.
Okay, hello, everyone. All right, thank you. I really sincerely apologize. I don't know if you heard me, but this was the worst internet connection I've had in the middle of a meeting in 18 months of working in and out of the office. So thank you for everybody's patience and sticking around, and probably apologies to anybody who's trying to watch this later remotely and getting these terrible gaps in the audio. So it's a good look for everybody. But anyway, let me try to share my screen and we'll jump back in. Okay, can we see the screen? All right, very good. Thanks, everyone. Again, my apologies. So let me just recap the sort of general opportunities along the corridor, and then we'll go from there. So again, we think that there's more flexibility and options along the southern portion of the corridor because we have more flexibility. We have wide medians that we can utilize and reallocate for other uses and users. We don't have that same flexibility in the northern portion of the corridor. And so that's something that I think you'll see when we try to share some of our alternatives. And again, I think more than anything, we just wanted to highlight these gaps in the networks and our sort of thinking about how we fill them. So let me now speak to a couple of different alternatives that we've identified for the southern portion of the corridor. So the first is an approach that fills in the gaps in the bicycle and pedestrian networks, but it maintains the curb lines where they are. And the reason for doing that is mostly from a cost perspective and because it's less disruptive overall to the corridor. In this particular alternative, and again, we'll show some examples of this in a moment, we can reduce the median width, but we still have a wide median in place and we can allocate that space more than anything for wider bike lanes. If we maintain the curb lines, again, that sort of minimizes the costs and disruptions, but it also means that we don't have as many opportunities to implement new landscaping on the roadway edges or to provide wider sidewalks. The second alternative is a much more major reconfiguration of the roadway, where we look at expanding the existing set of multi-use trails along the corridor and then providing continuous bike lanes and continuous sidewalks along the corridor. The way that we do that is to much more significantly narrow the medians and allocate that space for sidewalks and bike lanes. But as you'll see, we still think that there are opportunities for landscaping in the medians along with landscaping on the edges of the roadway as well. So let's talk about what these alternatives look like. And let's first sort of recap what the configuration of the roadway looks like. So I think the really important point here is, as you can see from the image on the right and then the renderings on the left, we have wide medians that have landscaping currently, but they're not providing the same, but at the same time, we're sort of sacrificing other types of infrastructure by having these wide medians. And so there are portions, again, where we have either no sidewalks or no on-street bike lanes. And so again, the thinking is, what can we do to provide more of a complete corridor? So the first alternative is, again, where we just narrow the medians and we keep the curb lines where they are. So this is an example of what the corridor looks like to the south of La Orilla Road, where there are no sidewalks in the southbound direction. There is a trail on the west side of the roadway, but there's no sidewalks in that portion. And again, we've got a really wide median here, over about 30 feet. So under this sort of basic alternative, what we can do is, if we narrow this median down a little bit, but we don't move the curb lines, the biggest thing that we can do is we can take those existing bike lanes, which are only 5 feet wide, and we can widen them to something like 6-foot bike lanes with 3-foot buffers. So we can make a much, much wider bicycle facility, but it's just an on-street bike lane. Another portion of this corridor, again, where we have a raised median, we can narrow it down from something like 26 feet to 12 feet. So we keep enough of a median space for landscaping in the middle, but we can add in bike lanes where we have no bike lanes at all, in particular the section to the north of Samara Road. So this is, again, where if we're going to complete these sets of facilities and opportunities for bicyclists or pedestrians, we need to reconfigure the corridor a little bit. And so here in particular, we're taking away part of the median and allocating that space for on-street bike lanes. The second alternative is a version that's more disruptive, but also a little bit more transformative. And so what you see here is an example of a portion of the corridor between Samara Road and Butterfield Trail. And this is that same portion I showed you up here, where we have no on-street bike lanes currently, but we've got a pretty significant median that we can work with. So one other option is we can actually do multiple things. We can narrow the median down pretty significantly to something even like 6 feet, where we have a turn lane, or wider than that, where we don't have turn lanes or needs for turning movements. So then we can still have some landscaping in the middle. And then we can have something like 5-foot bike lanes plus a buffer on on both sides, along with a multi-use trail at sidewalk level on one side of the roadway. So one of the key kind of questions here is, does this all kind of fit together? And what we want to, and we'll get to in a moment, is that, yeah, that we actually have that opportunity. So one of the key kind of questions here is, why are we looking at a multi-use trail as part of this configuration? And one of the real reasons for that is we have existing multi-use trails, but there are significant gaps in those trails. And then the other reason that we're looking at potentially multi-use trails along this corridor is that not everybody is going to feel comfortable using on-street bike lanes, no matter how wide they are. So what we see in these images are portions of the Riverview Trail that takes a sort of detour and spur to the northeast, and leaves a big gap along the corridor. You can see the trail in the image on the upper right. And then when we get to Butterfield Trail, we have no on-street bike lanes and no trail along the corridor in either case. But because we have such wide medians, we actually have the opportunity to do some really significant things along the corridor, and portions of, and pretty much the entire corridor from Montaigne Road to Paradise Boulevard. We have the opportunity, the width, to do both of these things, to provide on-street bike lanes and to provide a multi-use trail at sidewalk level that's separated from traffic. So this is a view of what this would look like from the street view. This shows what it could look like from an overhead perspective. So this is linking in with the Piedras Marcadas Trail, where if you were to narrow that median down, you can see how we could incorporate on-street bike lanes and a multi-use trail at sidewalk level and make this whole kind of network of connections. One kind of last set of things that I want to show, I know we've got a couple of questions or comments in the chat, but again, we have these existing trails at sidewalk level on portions of the corridor. To the south of Paradise Boulevard, there is a trail that terminates just south of the intersection. And then there are existing trails at sidewalk level along Paradise Boulevard. So one of the real opportunities here is to kind of convert and widen these sidewalks into this network of multi-use trails at sidewalk level. The last thing I wanted to show here, and let me zoom in, is just to give a sense of like what this means in terms of changes to the median and how the space could be reallocated. So this is a graphic showing the section between Samara Road and Butterfield Trail. So you can see the existing aerial photography underneath, and then line work that shows on-street bike lanes, two general purpose travel lanes in each direction. We have a sidewalk on the north side with a landscape buffer, and then a 10-foot multi-use trail on the south side. I'm sorry, on the, not the north side, because we're looking sort of north is to the right here. So this is the west side up here. We have a sidewalk on the west side, the top side of the screen, and then a multi-use trail on the bottom side, or the northbound or east side of the corridor. So we can actually sort of make all these pieces fit together. So this has been part of our analysis to say, okay, if we were trying to accommodate all these different user groups and make this complete network of trails, can we do that? Can we make that happen? And so we wanted to go through some of the engineering analysis to see if that is indeed the case. And so that's what we're trying to show with some of these images here. So let me stop and look at what we've got in the chat. So comments from Roger Martinez. Somebody is from their phone wrote in, keep in mind cars regularly breach sidewalks out of control along the southern part, so visual barrier like shrubs are important. And then Rogers indicated he likes alternative one for the Paseo or the Paradise to Montaños segment. He'd like to see improvements at the Paseo del Norte intersection because it really doesn't seem like a pedestrian friendly crossing. And you are correct there. So that's one of the things that we are looking at with some of this engineering design work, is how can we slow down traffic to make that work for other at that particular intersection, to slow down the turning movements and make it more comfortable for bicyclists and pedestrians. Other comments or thoughts on these alternatives? And again, raised hands or comments in chat are welcome. Karen, I see you've got your physical hand up. Yeah.
My physical hand up again. Quick question. you're jumping to north of Calle Nortina, but you skipped the east side of the street where it's just a dirt trail, south of Calle Nortina down to Butterfield.
Yes, yeah, so that is along a city-owned open space, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've looked at this whole corridor, and let me go down to that farther north. This section right here is the one that you're talking about, right? Above where it says Riverview Estates on the screen. Yeah, so that's an area where we are coordinating. I don't have, we've actually put together kind of renderings of what that could look like. Because this is city-owned property, there is an opportunity to utilize that right-of-way on the western edge of this open space to put in a trail of some sort. If we have to stick to the existing curb line, then our options are a little bit more limited, and we're probably looking at just a set of on-street bike lanes. But because that's city-owned open space, and because we're talking about needing probably just 10 feet or so in order to build a trail along the northbound side here, the east side of the roadway, we do think that that's a possibility. Another comment, as a confident cyclist, I would think alternative 2 is best, as long as you can slow traffic too. If you're able to type in a follow-up comment, as a confident cyclist, would you prefer to be on street, or would you prefer to use the multi-use trail at sidewalk level? And the reason I ask is that one of the areas of interest here is, providing as many different types of options as possible. It depends on the speed of traffic, which is, I think, probably the right, absolutely a fair answer. So we're looking at kind of complementary techniques, reducing the posted speed to 35 miles per hour along the corridor, but narrowing travel lanes, implementing street trees on the edges. These are proven techniques for having a traffic calming effect, for reducing travel speeds a little bit. So this is one of the reasons why we're looking at those options, is both to provide opportunities for people to travel on the roadway if they feel like they want to travel at higher speeds, and avoid conflicts with people walking their dogs, pushing a stroller, those kinds of things. And what we typically see from the research is that the more confident bicyclists prefer to be on the street, because they can go faster, but you're more likely to attract different types of users with the multi-use trail at sidewalk level. Comment from Debbie: if nothing changes regarding the commercial complexes of the golf course PDN intersection, I won't worry left-hand turns hitting cyclists and the Starbucks line up causing cyclists to be moved into traffic. Or I would worry that those dynamics would come to pass. I think that's a very fair point. Other thoughts or comments on these alternatives? Another point liking this in favor of separation from pedestrians and keeping bicyclists and pedestrians in sort of separate domains to some degree. All right, we'll keep the chat comments coming. And again, if you have a physical hand that you'd like to raise instead of a virtual one, please feel free to just jump in case I miss you while I'm going through the material this evening. All right, so let me talk a little bit more about the northern portion of the corridor. But first, before we do that, I guess I wanted to just stop for a second and kind of recap these two alternatives and think about them in terms of strengths and weaknesses. And hopefully this is a helpful way to think about things for everybody. So, again, we're sort of teasing through these two alternatives. There's going to be further analysis needed on both of these, and if either of them are selected before anything gets designed. So it's nothing is set in stone, but we do see some general strengths and weaknesses to these two different alternatives. So one thing to point out is that in terms of the way that vehicles operate along the corridor, taking away travel lanes, making changes to the medians, adding features to the sides of the roadway is not going to really have any major impact to traffic operations. But we will see some more significant impacts to costs. So alternative one, where we're kind of reallocating space from the median, has definitely lower, more moderate costs than an alternative where we're not just narrowing the median, but we're also moving the curb lines at the edges. That impacts the drainage along the corridor, sort of reshaping the sidewalks, all of those things does add more expenses and has more significant impacts during construction. But it does allow for some of these benefits to other user groups. And so hopefully you see that in our little table here. So in terms of impacts to pedestrians, under alternative one, because we're really not changing what happens outside the curb lines, any gaps in the sidewalk, any places where we don't have any separation or landscaping or buffers, that's not going to change under the first alternative. Under the second alternative, we're sort of trading disruption over the long-term benefits of having complete sidewalks, complete bicycle lanes, complete trails, and more landscaping and buffering and separation between bicyclists, pedestrians, and motorists. So those are really kind of the trade-offs here, and we wanted to sort of highlight that in a couple of ways. And Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, but we will post the slides online as well. So not just this unfortunately somewhat choppy presentation session, but the slides will get posted online as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let me talk for a minute too about the northern portion of the corridor. And this is where I think, as you'll see, conditions are much more constrained. So we're talking now about the section from Paradise up to West Side Boulevard. So the aerial view on the right is a much more representative image of conditions along the corridor, where we have much narrower medians, in some cases only a couple of feet, in other places more like 4 to 6 feet. We have on-street bike lanes, but they're generally quite narrow, in a lot of places only 4 feet wide or even narrower. And again, not much separation from motorists. So what are the alternatives? Well, in some cases, they're really pretty modest. So this is the section between Paradise Boulevard and Irving Boulevard. This is, again, the Bernalillo County portion of the corridor where we have residences that have driveways that open up onto Golf Course Road. So this is kind of a unique portion of the corridor. We have a 7-foot striped buffer that sort of functions for on-street parking purposes for those homes. And then we have a set of narrow bike lanes, only 4 or 5 feet on either side of the roadway. But it's constrained. We've got homes on one side and subdivision walls on the other side. And then we have a 2-way left turn lane. So there's not a lot of room to sort of move things around too much. So one thing that we can do is we can take away little bits of or small portions of the strike buffer or portions of the travel lanes and reallocate that space to try to get like 5-foot bike lanes in both directions. But we're much more limited in the kinds of things that we can do. The northern portion of the corridor, the travel lanes are a little bit wider. So unless we're going to carve into our really narrow 6-foot median already, the biggest things that we can do is we can make the travel lanes narrower from something like 12 feet in the center lanes down to 10 feet and reallocate that space to make 5-foot bike lanes with a little bit of a buffer. There may be an opportunity to, again, transform that median a little bit, but that's probably a disruption and a big expense when we were only talking about having a couple of extra feet to allocate for other uses and users. So this is a challenging portion of the corridor where our options are much more constrained. So there's things that we can look at and do with restriping more than anything. But again, not a great set of options. Any questions about this northern portion of the corridor? Before we talk about our last sort of sets of recommendations, then open up for general comments and discussion. All right, hearing none and seeing that. Go ahead. I can't see you, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. This is Renee Horvath, and that section between Paradise and Irving, you're right. It's got the subdivision walls on the west side and the houses on the east side, but I don't think there's a a sidewalk along the subdivision wall, right? It's
Yeah, that's correct. So that's one of the challenges along this portion of the corridor. And let me jump up there. So we have, you're exactly right. So to the south of Green Avenue, which is right here, we do not have sidewalks at all on the west side, the southbound side of the roadway.
right.
But in order to add in sidewalks means something else sort of has to give. So your options are sort of, you can take away a travel lane, but we've got pretty high traffic volumes. We can take away the two-way left turn lane, or we can take away the buffer that separates motor or the homes on the east side from motor vehicle traffic. So we don't have any kind of great options along here. So this is what what you're showing. There's this, right, there's a sidewalk that terminates right here. And then there is a sidewalk on the other side of the roadway.
So I'm just wondering if the emphasis should be on the east side where the homes are with the walking paths for the pedestrians and not put a sidewalk on the west side next to the wall. Because I don't think people really enjoy walking with fast traffic and a wall next to them. So maybe.
Yeah. So let me go back to our alternative here, because this is an important point. We're actually not proposing sidewalks along this stretch. This is the one section where we're proposing to leave that gap in place.
Oh, okay.
And there's a couple of thoughts behind that. So one is Green Avenue actually just runs completely parallel to Golf Course Road and then reconnects down here.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if somebody was on foot, then they could actually utilize Green Avenue, which is just a local neighborhood road, to reconnect to the southern portion of the corridor. And then the other option that I think could be provided is a crosswalk at this location right here, then to connect to the sidewalks on the east side of the roadway. And so for that very reason, and so yeah, you can see here, we do not have sidewalks on the west or southbound side of the roadway. But this is a location where we are identifying the need for and potential benefits of a pedestrian crossing. So that's shown in this map right here. So if I could elaborate on that point just a little bit, one of our major recommendations is that there should be additional crossings along Golf Course Road. What those crossings look like is something that we need to figure out still. In a lot of places where we have medians, that means we could put in pedestrian refuge islands and make it so that a pedestrian would only have to cross 2 lanes of traffic at a time. We also have long distances between pedestrian crossings. And so that's a consideration as well, and why we're looking at additional crossings. In some places, you have to go from Kachina to La Orilla, for example, is it's only a quarter of a mile between Kachina and La Orilla, but north of La Orilla, the next crossing is at Calle Norteña, which is over a mile away. Between Paseo and Paradise right now, it's 3/4 of a mile. Between Paradise and Irving, it's almost a full mile with no pedestrian crossings in between. So it's a really long stretch. This is a transit corridor with fairly regular service. Again, we're trying to encourage more pedestrian access to commercial nodes and recreational sites. So having, gaps of close to a mile in a lot of places without pedestrian crossings, this map shows it visually, is just really challenging. So what we've identified, what we see in these kind of traffic symbols are the signalized intersections, and then in the black outline with the white pedestrian sort of silhouette are proposed pedestrian crossings along the corridor. And then there is one trail crossing to the north of Calle Norteña. To the northern portion of the corridor, it's more challenging in terms of how you squeeze in pedestrian crossings or where you might want to do that. But we have identified, I think, a number of locations across the corridor where it would make sense in terms of access to transit, spacing, access to recreational sites or to schools to have more pedestrian crossings.
And your pedestrian crossings are in a visible area, not along a curve of a road?
Yeah, so that's one of the things we need to sort of verify and validate a little bit more. The other thing that we're looking at is we want to make sure that if there are crossings, that we could make sure we have a pedestrian refuge island in any of those locations, so that you only have to cross 2 lanes of traffic at a time. And I think for most of the corridor, that's pretty feasible.
And the visibility is really important. Like
Yes.
a straight road rather than a curved section, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really good point.
And this goes up to West Side Road. right?
Correct. Yeah, that's the northern terminus of our study.
Yeah. So the challenging part is from McMahon to West Side.
So McMahon to West Side is, it's still kind of being built out. It's the one section of the corridor that's not fully built out yet. And so there's, I think, some uncertainty about it, what exactly that's going to look like. And so here's West Side now. We've got Black Arroyo. There's a proposed trail here, but we don't have anything yet. I think there's a proposed development here. And then we have commercial node and a hospital at the southern end of McMahon. So there's not a lot of through streets. There is one right here, and then potentially the Black Arroyo. So I think those are both locations that we would recommend that the city study further as the corridor develops a little bit more.
The council actually has a restriping project on Black Arroyo right now. Over by, I think a little farther east, southeast.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Restriping Black Arroyo.
Yeah, it was dangerous. Like the neighborhood there felt it was dangerous. So
Is that along a local road, Susan, over here? I'm not quite sure because it's not, you're not talking about on Golf Course Road, right?
no, on Black Arroyo. Let me
Yeah,
get
I'm not
you
talking
that.
about Black Arroyo, the
Oh.
like drainage facility.
Oh, not the drainage, no, on the actual road.
Roger asks, have underground tunnels or pedestrian crossings been considered? We are not actively considering those. One of the reasons is the corridor is pretty built out on both sides. So just the sort of logistics of making that work is tricky. That could be a possibility at some of the trail crossings at the arroyos though.
Are you going to work with a developer south of West Side Boulevard, the vacant land that you have, because they are building apartments there? It seems like maybe you could work with them to make make the improvements that you'd like to see along that road for pedestrians and.
Yeah, so my understanding is that they will be required to meet the street side requirements or elements identified in the city's development process manual, which would call for wide sidewalks and landscape buffers. And so that type of, those requirements would go above and beyond what we have along most of the corridor. So hopefully that is part of what we see along this stretch of Golf Course Road.
Yeah, that would be good.
But I haven't reviewed their development plans yet, so I'm speaking more about from a city process standpoint.
Okay.
All right, let's talk real quick about some other recommendations, and then we'll just open it up for comments. In just a moment too, I'm going to turn it over to John Cruz from Lee Engineering, who has been patiently waiting again for me to get through all of my points. So just a few other things to speak to and highlight. We have been looking at traffic signals and operations along the corridor. One concept that we've discussed is reducing the posted speed along the extent of the corridor to 35 miles per hour. John, feel free to speak up if I'm mischaracterizing anything. But if there are opportunities to improve and upgrade the signal equipment, particularly if we do ultimately recommend one of these alternatives that brings along on-street bike lanes or multi-use trails. So having signal equipment that better detects the presence of bicyclists and pedestrians could be a real benefit. And then it's also been more than 10 years since the signal timing along the corridor was, since the signal timing plan was developed. So there's an opportunity there to revisit that signal timing plan and make sure that the traffic operations are consistent with the sort of emerging sets of users and needs along the corridor. We also heard some requests and asked that we consider signage and wayfinding along the corridors, especially if we think about expanding the trails network. Again, we have some trails and they're just not super well connected. So if we do build a trails network, complementing that with signage and wayfinding could have a real kind of placemaking benefit, and then also orientation in terms of helping people reach their destinations. And then finally, this is a corridor that's also got some interesting topographical challenges. So looking at drainage and the use of kind of creative stormwater retention techniques through green stormwater infrastructure is something that we're looking at as well, particularly in the Bernalillo County portion of the corridor. Lastly, I want to speak to some potential improvements related to lighting. So John, if you're still here, thanks for sticking around, and ask you to speak through this question, because there's a real, one other element that we heard is a desired improvement would be additional lighting. And so the Lee Engineering folks have reviewed the existing lighting conditions along the corridor and have some specific thoughts and recommendations. So John, this is the first slide of which you sent me earlier today. So feel free to jump in and I'll just drive the ship for you.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Aaron. So when we talk about lighting for the corridor, I want to go over a few things just very briefly tonight. The first is to look at just existing conditions, a recap of maybe some things you're aware of and have probably already heard before in these meetings. And then the second is a set of basically tiered approaches that fit both alternatives for the corridor. Next slide, Aaron. So we took a look at the existing conditions. Overall, there is not a continuous lighting system, as you probably know, on this corridor. The placement is fairly sparse around intersections, stop signs, and side streets. And one of the most pressing issues we found in reviewing these locations was there's quite a few locations where the lights are actually placed behind a stop sign or behind a crosswalk. And what this actually does, as you can see in the top photo, is it casts a shadow on the cars approaching the stop sign, and then any pedestrians attempting to cross the side street here. The second kind of most glaring issue that I know Aaron talked about earlier in this meeting was the trail crossing there at Golf Course in Piedras Mercadas. There are no lights currently present here. So one of the things you'll see in the next slide are some of these tiers we can take to remedy some of these issues. So the first step that we're proposing is a just enhanced lighting of the pedestrian trails and intersection features along the road. So this would not be a continuous lighting system like you may expect on a larger arterial in the city, but it seeks to correct or fix some of those issues we just talked about. So the trail crossing, of course, this is an example, although not a multi-use trail. It is a lighted pedestrian crossing on University Boulevard, shown as an example. And then on the right, we have an image showing where potential poles could be installed. So again, lighting the intersections a little better, and then enhancing the stop signs and crosswalks present along the side streets. Go ahead. And then the second and third tier, I tried to place them almost equally with each other in terms of ranking, and actually in terms of cost, they're very similar in price. But one thing we noticed is that the commercial areas on Golf Course, again, do not have any lighting, and there are so many turning vehicles and pedestrian interactions that occur in areas like this, that an improved lighting system in these parts would be very beneficial. Typically, these are constructed with 40-foot poles. The bottom left image, of course, is showing Coors Boulevard in Albuquerque and some commercial development with a few streetlights lighting the side street access points to some of these commercial developments. And it really helps to, point out vehicles and pedestrians at night in these areas. And then the next tier is a pedestrian trail system. This golf course has as we've been talking, a pedestrian trail on the east side of the road, shown there on the right image. And that's about how the light poles would be spaced. Typically, they're a 20-foot decorative type pole, spaced anywhere from 50 to 100 feet, 150 feet apart. And as you can see, the image on the left from Hobbs, New Mexico, I think this is actually just a really great trail and pedestrian area that they've constructed. It, the lighting poles can really help to improve the streetscape in these areas, in addition to, of course, improving the lighting system for the pedestrians as a whole. And then lastly is your more traditional arterial lighting system, basically where poles are placed on both sides of the road, about 150 to 200 feet. And depending on the final cross-section and desired lighting criteria, these can be constructed with 30 to 40-foot poles. So this image, of course, on the left is Southern Boulevard in Albuquerque. You can even see a multi-use trail on the right side of the road. And these particular lights were designed to cast enough light on that trail to light the pedestrians in addition to the road itself.
Great, thanks, John. Let me just jump in and speak to where we go from here, and then we'll open it up to questions. I think we had advertised this meeting till 7, but we can stay until 7:30, and I appreciate those of you who are sticking around. So just to let you sort of know where we are at with the study, we have an existing conditions report that documents the beginning part of this presentation and all of the existing issues and observations along the corridor. That will be published online shortly. We're holding, obviously, our final public meeting of the year tonight, and then we have a public comment period that will go through the end of the year. The final report will not be in early 2020, it will be in early 2022. So we encourage you to check the project website for updates. That's on the screen right there, and then also at the top of the chat box. So let me, at this point, open it up and ask, are there more any particular questions and comments? Debbie has a question for John. These are 4 options, or do they go together? So asking about the lighting.
So there are almost 4 different options. Of course, if we choose to construct an arterial system, the intent behind a system like that would be to include everything in the first tiers, so the trail crossings, pedestrian features, all of the side streets and stop signs.
Sorry, can I ask a quick clarifying question? This is Debbie. So you're saying tier 1 is standalone and the other 2 tiers are standalone, but tier 4 would cover the other 3?
Yes, exactly.
Other
Well,
Thanks.
I have a
Yeah.
question about the lighting also. I mean, I see a lot of dots where the lights would be. The other issue is, I mean, I travel that road a lot, and so it sounded like somebody was concerned about the lighting, and maybe there's some areas that could be improved, but I just want you to be aware, sometimes people don't like a lot of bright lights. You got a lot of houses backed up to that road, and they wouldn't want all that lighting, into their home area. And So, maybe, think about it a little more cautiously, placing where the best place to put the lighting. And I think we still have the night sky ordinance to point the lights down and shield them so that they don't broadcast broadly into people's yards and houses. I think we still have that, correct?
Yes, so all of the light fixtures that we typically use in applications like this are shielded, especially when they're near residential areas like that. Again, to keep the light out of people's yards. A shorter pole can also be used. Different parts of the corridor, we can go to a taller pole in the commercial areas, shorter pole in the residential areas, with, of course, the goal to improve safety throughout the corridor at night.
And that open space area, the Peters Mercatus, that's probably the best view area along the road to see the city. So, I mean, you were talking about some tree-lined roads, which I think are attractive, but I think we need to consider our areas that have the best views of the city and not block them with trees or maybe too much lighting. Or do we really need lighting around the open space area? So that's just a comment I have.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. That's good to note.
Thank you, Renee. Roger asked, what's the dollar amount for the proposed improvements minimum to maximum at this time? We are in the process of developing cost estimates, but that's not something that we have identified yet. I think at one point that I don't know that I made as clearly as I could have is the question about phasing. So I think there's a couple of important considerations here. So, and John, I'm kind of looking at you a little bit too, and I think lighting is sort of part of this question, but phasing is something that we could look at as well. Clearly, the northern portion of the corridor, where we're talking about restriping more than anything, it's a lower cost and potentially easier portion of the corridor to address with these initial set of improvements. The southern portion of the corridor, there's no question that it would be costly if we're talking about narrowing medians and or moving curb lines. We don't have defined cost estimates yet because we're still sort of developing these alternatives. And I know that the counselor's indicated she's open to a pretty significant range of ideas or possibilities. But what we can certainly say is that the first alternative would not be as costly, but we're still, again, no matter how we skin the cat, we still have to, if we're looking for ways to improve the bicycle facilities and close any gaps in the sidewalk network, then we need to find space to do that from the medians, and that would be disruptive and would create some costs. So long story short, we don't have specific numbers for you yet, but those are in development as we continue to firm up and flesh out these alternatives.
Say like another question for the attendees and other residents to think about is which section you consider the most important to address first, because it's a large stretch. I mean, it would be maybe half the cost of Paseo. I'm just throwing a number out there. So a lot, but we can do it, in pieces.
So Susan, just to build on that point, I think, so, we could, no matter which alternative we would propose for the southern portion of the corridor from Montano to Paradise, I think there are opportunities to do that in phases and to do those sort of segment by segment as money becomes available. So that's speaking to your question, right? Which is if there are portions of the corridor that may be highest priority, I would say from a sort of detached technical standpoint, we would probably recommend that the locations where there are no current bicycle or pedestrian facilities or gaps in those networks, that those would probably be the portions that we would prioritize first and look to include in the first phase, because while we have other portions of the corridor where we would like to improve existing conditions for bicyclists and pedestrians, there are some segments where we have limited or no facilities for bicyclists or pedestrians. In particular, the segment to the south of Calle Norteña where we have no on-street bike lanes. Those are the kind of locations where we would look to propose as a first phase if it had to be phased. Roger writes that the proposed improvement should consider what the roadway is designated as, then at highest priority would be safety for all travelers. So with the PDN and golf course intersection. So I think that's very much consistent with what we're thinking, is that we'd look for safety needs, gaps in the network as the real kind of critical priorities to start.
Are you looking at, since you spoke about Paseo and golf course, that commercial area, somebody mentioned earlier the Starbucks issue and cars, because of their drive-up window, sometimes what I'm hearing is the cars are sticking out into the lanes. Are you guys looking at that also? And what can be done to address that?
Yeah, we are looking at that intersection. We spent a lot of time discussing that intersection. We've also spent some time discussing that the options for the city are somewhat limited, and that the best options in terms of really addressing the challenges are improvements to the circulation within the shopping plaza itself, which is something that the city can't force the issue on. But what we were hearing and gotten a lot of feedback about is that the Starbucks right here, that the queues will back up into Golf Course Road, which does create some safety hazards. So we're identifying areas of further study. It's a bit beyond the scope of our study to fully address the access in and around this particular shopping plaza. But that is very much something that's a highlight of our study, the need to address access in and out of the shopping plaza. So, again, I think it's important to reiterate, this is kind of, the study's the first phase in what will be a longer process. So our study in particular is looking at what are our proposed sort of alignments and general recommendations for the corridor. We've done some initial engineering work to make sure that those recommendations and alternatives are technically feasible, but there's additional design work that would need to take place, and access in and out of that shopping plaza is one of those questions that's going to take a more detailed and more specific study that looks at things like turning movements, potential access modifications, extending turn lanes, things like that. I saw another comment in the chat about the intersection of Marna Lynn. It is important to, hopefully I won't mischaracterize the work that the city conducted a few years ago. This is the intersection of Marna Lynn between Paradise and Paseo. Marna Lynn was evaluated whether a traffic signal is warranted at that intersection. We've heard a lot of comments about safety concerns and challenges crossing that intersection. The city's analysis from a traffic signal warrant perspective was that it did not warrant a traffic signal at the time, but we're very much documenting the public comments and feedback about that intersection. We are recommending a pedestrian crossing in and around this intersection as well. So again, what that crossing looks like and how that sort of interacts with traffic flow is something that needs to be evaluated a little bit further. But this is a general area where a pedestrian crossing would make a lot of sense. There's a school on the west side, recreational facilities to the east. I'm sorry, reverse those, a school to the east of the corridor and recreational facilities to the west.
And can you explain how the pedestrian crossing works? Is it just saying if you're a pedestrian, you should cross here?
Yes.
Is that
Yeah.
what it works?
So good question, Renee. So one of the things that we're looking at is additional designated crossing locations. So pedestrians can cross in undesignated locations. It's not always advisable, but having designated crosswalks with signage and pavement markings and and spaces for pedestrians to cross the road in 2 stages. So that's what we have going on right here. This is at the Piedras Marcadas Trail to the south of Paseo del Norte, where we have an east-west trail that intersects with Golf Course Road. It's signed. We're going to recommend additional crosswalk striping and potentially other treatments or countermeasures to increase motorist awareness of this particular crossing. But what you'll notice too is that it's got a nice wide pedestrian refuge in the middle, so you can cross in 2 stages. You only have to cross 2 lanes of traffic at a time. So the specific types of pedestrian crossings and what those involve is something that we need to define still, but our first effort has been to look at locations where that would be appropriate.
And so the pedestrian still has to wait for the cars to pass and then cross. They should not expect people to stop for them, correct? And I mean, they should slow down.
Right.
But
yeah, well, I mean, I'm technically in a designated crossing. Pedestrians have right of way in a lot of circumstances, but practically speaking, you're right that they look for gaps in the motor vehicle travel. There's a possibility that we would look for and recommend treatments like a hawk signal that bring traffic to a complete stop, but we would need to look at the conditions before we recommend that and determine whether that's appropriate given the traffic signal spacing, given the speeds and traffic volumes and things like that. So that's not a that's not a sort of first recommendation, but that's among the options when you're putting in these kinds of pedestrian crossings.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm asking is if a pedestrian expects the traffic to stop, and they start to cross, but the other car doesn't see them, then you could have a problem. So I'm at the point of thinking that the pedestrians should be wary of the cars and don't expect them to stop for them. Just wait till they pass and then go across.
Yeah, no, that's probably good common sense.
Well, and I'm thinking about the little girl that got hit in the Northeast. It's in my dad's area, and the other car did not see them cross. One car stopped, the little girls ran, and the other car did not see them crossing. So I'm now think that pedestrians just have to be wary and wait for the cars to pass and then cross when there's an opening. That's kind of my thinking at this point, to be on the safe side.
Sure. And the last thing that I'll say in this is that the city has guidance on type of crossing placement and spacing and things like that. So, we will certainly look to reconcile the needs that we've identified with the city's guidance and city's technical standards. Any last questions or comments? We are coming up on 7:30, and I just, again, more than anything, want to thank everybody for your patience and understanding, and I apologize for technical difficulties this evening, but I very much appreciate the continued attendance. I did not see the participation level drop when I signed back on either time, so I really appreciate that. A couple of last comments that I just want to make sure I read out loud. Asking, could speed limits be reduced to make consistent first cheaply? Speed limits can be reduced. The most consistent way to ensure that speeds are reduced is through design treatments and things like narrowing travel lanes, creating kind of a sense of enclosure through street trees and things like that. So yes, we can reduce speed limits, but speed limits alone don't necessarily reduce speeding. They're best reduced alongside other measures. And then another comment, the new safe harbor pedestrian crossing is used successfully now by a lot of people. So yes, that's a sort of model that we would look to mimic in other places. Susan, do you have any last words you want to say before we close out the meeting this evening?
I was going to add that we are going to post a very short survey on to determine what kind of bicyclists, what are bicyclists' preferences for streets. And we've heard a lot of good comment tonight on, if there's a lot of traffic and it's going fast, then you want to use the multi-use trail. Otherwise, more athletic bicyclists do prefer those streets, but just to get a feeling of how golf course is envisioned by neighborhoods for bicycle use. Will it be a route that people are using as a fast track or more of a recreational leisure? So that will be on the website. We want as much feedback as we can get, and that was all I was going to add. And all of this meeting and the presentation.
Down to the gaps and the technical difficulties.
They were nice. They were kind of like Halloween-esque, spooky feeling for a bit.
All right. Well, again, thank you for everybody's time and attention and patience this evening. Appreciate all of the thoughts and comments and feedback. And feel free to share the link and send us thoughts and questions. And as Susan indicated, the comment period will be open through the end of the year. So more materials will be posted online and there will be more opportunities to comment. So again, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your time and attention tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Project. Thanks all.